A line of windows showed the city like a miniature metropolis, glass and sunlight and endless possibility. He handed 4 cards to the cleaning ladies like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. The cards were matte black, heavier than credit cards, each embossed with a golden emblem that caught the light when he tilted his hand. For a moment the women, young, middle-aged, and elderly, looked like something out of a painting, the kind of people observers only saw in passing. "Keep them," he said. "Spend whatever you like. No questions. Take one afternoon and buy something for yourself. I want to see what you choose." His voice was casual, almost bored, and that made the situation stranger. The billionaire had made fortunes from software and property in markets that never slept. He lived in an apartment with art that cost more than some countries' annual budgets and wore shoes that seemed to have their own air of authority. But the cards were simple. They didn't ask where the money came from. They only wanted to see what would happen when people who cleaned other people's lives for a living were given a small, unlooked-for freedom. "Wasp?" one of the women asked. Her name tag read Mariah. Her hands were calloused but neat, nails trimmed. She smelled faintly of lemon cleanser and hot coffee, a scent the billionaire somehow found honest. "Because you work hard," he answered. "Because you're around the lives of people who have everything and they don't notice what's missing. Take it as a test or a gift. I just want to know what you buy." They clustered together in the doorway afterward, 4 of them comparing the cards with an almost childlike glee. There was Mariah, Mia, Rosa, and Chantel. They had different ages, different accents, different histories stitched together by the cadence of the building, but they shared one thing. People assumed they didn't dream beyond the next paycheck. They weren't used to being given the lead role in a story for once. "Are we allowed to go anywhere?" Mia asked, biting her lip. She had a small boy at home and often stretched every dollar into 2 weeks. "Anywhere," he said. "Just come back and tell me what you bought." They left with a kind of hush and the cards tucked like secret letters into their wallets. The billionaire watched from his window, not because he couldn't wait to see the results, but because watching people choose their own small rebellions made him feel a little less like a stranger in his fortune. Money had been a language to him for decades. This was a chance to hear other dialects. Mariah went to a bookstore. It's hard to describe the way she smiled when she walked between shelves. Books were cheap companions in her world, but rarely new. She'd grown used to paperback edges softened by other hands. She bought a thick novel she had borrowed once from a friend and a box of fancy tea because the cashier wrapped it like a small promise. She took herself to a cafe and sat with a cup in the novel and let the minutes be hers. When she told the billionaire about it later, her eyes shone in a way that didn't fit into any balance sheet. Mia spent her card on tools and schooling. She bought sturdy boots for her son, a backpack that would not fray after a season, and a small tablet loaded with tutoring apps. She explained that she wanted her boy to feel brave in school, and that a tablet might be the light he needed when homework felt like a mountain. When she handed back the receipt, her hands trembled not from shame but from the wonder of being able to give. Rosa used her card differently. She had always kept her small apartment immaculate, with curtains that matched and potted plants that looked proud. She bought heavy velvet curtains the color of late-night wine and a mirror big enough to show her full posture. She told the billionaire she never had a mirror that showed her whole frame and she wanted to see herself as tall as she felt on the inside. Chantel's name carried the rhythm of a song. She was the youngest, a keeper of jokes and a bright, restless energy. She went shopping in a way that surprised everyone. Instead of buying shoes or treatments for someone else, she bought a sleek black dress that made her feel like she could step onto a stage. She bought makeup she'd only tried once before at a party and a pair of earrings that winked when she laughed. Later she confessed, voice low and urgent, that she had always wanted to teach kids how to act. They reported back across days and weeks, and each story felt like a small echo of a life redirected. The billionaire found himself listening with a kind of hunger he hadn't expected. He realized he'd made money for other people's dreams but rarely for the private, ordinary ones that had nothing to do with social status. He scribbled notes and sometimes stepped in. A subscription for Mia's son's tutoring, a set of rare botanical seeds for Rosa, a camera for Mariah so she could take photographs and learn to frame the world in a new way. The experiment became a ritual. He began letting other people in. The doorman, a florist who came by the lobby every Wednesday, even the building's night security. He noticed something subtle. The choices people made didn't line up with his assumptions about worth or struggle. The woman who bought a haircut was preparing for an interview that meant rent money. The man who bought a bottle of wine intended it for a neighbor's birthday. Small, precise acts of care surfaced again and again. Then one afternoon Chantel didn't come back. She'd gone to an open call for a small role in an off-Broadway workshop. She sent a text full of emojis and then another that read, "I can't breathe, It's so loud, I've never felt this alive. The billionaire felt oddly hollow and very human at once. He paced. He called her agency. He called the center she mentioned. Finally, a message came through. She'd been offered a role in a workshop and the director wanted to meet the next day. He smiled like someone watching a brave scene play out. But the real surprise came a week later when Chantal walked into his office, her dress pressed, her earrings flashing, but her hands empty. She did not hand him a receipt. She clasped her card between two fingers. The edge had a soft curve as though it had been shaped by pockets in life. I didn't spend it, she said, and for a fraction of a second he felt that his experiment had failed. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a flyer from a community center, after-school theater for kids. She'd paid a deposit, booked the room for a month, and used the remainder of her card to buy snacks and paints. She had started a small scholarship for local children so they could try drama without the hurdle of fees. She'd printed a sign-up sheet with names scrawled and one crayon-headed sketch of a ship made from a kitchen table. I thought, she said, if I can get on stage, maybe someone else can too. It wasn't a dramatic confession. It was a fidelity to a memory. When she was small, she had watched a play once and felt like she was seeing the inside of a sun. Her mother couldn't afford the bus, there was no group in the neighborhood, and the lights had stayed for other people. She promised herself if she ever had money, even a little, she would make space for other kids. The billionaire stared at her and felt something twist in his chest. He had expected purchases, splurges, small rebellions against a life of limits. He had not expected the impulse to build. The envelope had no numbers, no spreadsheets. It had a list of children who would come on Saturdays and a scrawled note about the first play they would do. His mind, trained to map risk and return, tried to translate the math of it. A small deposit, a few snacks, an immeasurable tangle of hope. Word spread. The community center filled with laughter on Saturdays. Parents sat cross-legged as tiny feet practiced exits. The director, at first skeptical, eventually came to see the difference a weekly class made in kids' posture and voice. Mia's son discovered a penchant for stage effects and made a friend who later helped with science homework. Rosa, who had once bought velvet curtains for herself, came one evening to stitch simple costumes. Mariah brought a camera and started a project documenting dress rehearsals in grainy, glorious black and white. In the billionaire's ledger, these entries remained abstract numbers. In the neighborhood, they were palpable. A kid who learned to speak into a microphone, a mother who watched a play with new eyes, a woman who stitched costumes and felt proud of her seam. The cards had unlocked something less transactional and more ordinary: agency. He kept the black cards in his desk for a while, then gave them away again. Not everyone used their cards to start something new. Some bought comfort, some bought safety, and some spent on the people they loved. But Chantal's choice spread. Other recipients began to fund small projects: a pantry for an elderly neighbor, a scholarship for a child, a mural on a community wall. The billionaire watched these ripples and felt the architecture of his world shift, not in towers or balance sheets, but in neighborhoods and rehearsals and the slight change of posture a person carried after being noticed. He took out another card, thin, a network invitation from his foundation, and offered a space his foundation could rent for the next season. He had been keeping his money structured and tidy, but he remembered then that his real joy came from the mess. Unpredictable, human, sticky with laughter and mistakes. Keep it going, he told Chantal. Only if you promise to watch the first show, she replied. The night of the premiere, the billionaire sat in the third row. The lighting struck faces in the audience and made simple gestures look monumental. The children were raw, brave, and suddenly enormous. There was a scene where a small girl named Lila declared she would be a scientist and not be afraid. The audience breathed as one and then erupted. He felt a tear he hadn't earned and found himself clapping louder than etiquette required. After the show, people gathered in the lobby. Parents hugged, actors cried, and the billionaire moved through them until little Lila slipped her hand into his. Thank you, she said, and it was both direct and radiantly simple. Thank you, he answered, because he knew he had been given more than he had expected. He had been given a reminder that money without tenderness becomes mechanical and that the richest calculations sometimes return the smallest dividends. A laugh, a stage, a curtain that trembles with possibility. He no longer believed his fortune existed to impress strangers. He had learned it existed to amplify the small, stubborn lights already burning in his city. In the months that followed, those small purchases stitched a loose neighborhood into something steadier. They built a routine of Saturday rehearsals that drew parents and elders into kitchens and lobbies. Conversations flowered where there had been none. A mural appeared by the center, painted by children who learned to mix colors and names and daring. He walked past those windows and watched practice through glass, feeling less like an investor and more like an uneasy guardian of a fragile, beautiful experiment. It was not the kind of return any balance sheet could show. It was the slow work of courage and habit. A seamstress teaching costume sewing, a mother finding time for music, a boy who learned to speak into a mic without shaken.